Hello and welcome to Get Informed, America, the show that breaks through the mainstream media box to bring you real, smart news. Hi, I'm Dave Okenquist, and joining me is the editor of Informed American, Mr. Rodney Johnson. Rodney, good morning.
Morning, Dave.
Rodney, great to be back this week. Of course, I was away last week, and so I'm sure everyone was waiting for a new show, so we are back here. Rodney, I want to kick things right off with something that caught my eye from the Daily Mail, this chart that they have here. And it's basically about the coronavirus cases tanking. Look at this, the number of new infections per day. They look like they're almost cut in half from where they were just at the beginning of the year. And here in the article says, well, it doesn't seem to be vaccinations because only about 8% of the U.S. population has been vaccinated. And only a slightly number, I believe, cumulative cases of coronavirus are only about 27 million total. So it doesn't seem to be herd immunity. Rodney, what do you make of this rapid drop in cases nationally?
I think it's a couple of things. First, we had the huge run up in cases after Christmas, after people get together. So it seems obvious that when you go back to wherever you were, you're no longer, getting together with people you don't normally see, that the number of infections would drop. And so at the same time, there's always been the question of how many people actually have the virus. And so the estimate at the beginning was for every one person that is known to have it because we tested them, there are 10 people who have it that we didn't test. Now, as testing ramps up, that number drops. It's no longer 1 to 10. But if it's even cut in half, which would be a big thing, it's still 1 to 5. And so by your number, if 24 million people are proven to have the virus, that means that we have another 125 million who've had it that we didn't count, which means 150 million people have had or have the virus, along with the number of people who are vaccinated, which is more than half the nation at that point. And so, it starts to work its way through. And when I say half the nation, that's half of all of the nation, 335 million people. If we pull out kids, which is, 120 million, then you start dropping the numbers of people who are going to get the virus going forward. Doesn't mean they're not, doesn't mean we don't still have a problem and, overloading emergency systems and stuff, but we should see a drop in the number of infections as we go forward.
There's been another suggestion, and there's only a little bit of this out there, but that the testing, the PCR testing, has changed its threshold, lowered it down from, I believe, 42 cycles to 35 cycles, which may have caused false positives back in the last few months, over the last year, or potentially simply not catching. In other words, people might test positive, but they may not be quite as infectious. Do you make anything of that?
At the margin. I mean, does it matter to a few 100,000 or even a million people? Maybe. But when we're talking 140 million people, 150 million people, if you're changing the number by, 4 or 5 million, you're not changing the overall trend.
Okay, so you think that this has actually worked its way through the adult population much more than reported?
Well, I mean, by definition, we know we're not capturing a lot of people who have it. So it has to be the case. What we see are the numbers that you just showed. We see the numbers of infections. When's the last time you saw a number of projected infections, including people not tested? And we just don't see that very often.
No, that one is hard to find. And certainly, believe it, of that 8% of the U.S. population that's been vaccinated, we assume most of those people are the people who would spread it the most, meaning frontline health workers, depending on who wants to take the vaccine, or but more crucially, those who are most in danger, those over 65. So could we?
It's not. So I'll push back a little bit there. The people vaccinated are not those who are most likely to spread it. We know who's most likely to spread it. It's people who live in large family settings. There is no question that if you live in a household with more than 5 people, you are likely to be a spreader. And so that's the number. But those aren't the people we're vaccinating. We're vaccinating frontline workers, which you've talked about, who are at greater risk of getting it. But it's really 1-to-1, right? They're likely to get it from somebody they come in contact with, and those people tend to be, by reports, more conscientious about cleaning, taking off their clothes, washing their hands, wearing protective gear. Those people are getting vaccinated, plus people who would have the worst reaction to it, being people in nursing homes, the elderly, who are most likely not to be out and about. Mm-hmm. And so in a weird way, we're actually not going after the people most likely to spread it. We're going after the people most likely to get it from a spreader in a professional setting or to have an adverse effect.
So are you thinking maybe we should? So I mean, is this a policy idea to maybe roll out to large families?
No, because if you go down that road, the next question is, well, how do you get to those people? Okay, so you prioritize for vaccination people who are living in a household that has 6 or more people, and all of a sudden, people are going, "Hey, wait a second! That's how does that help? How is that equitable?" Would be the question that you would get, and I think you would have a very hard time answering it, and you would have a very hard time implementing it. Now, can you do it? Sure. You can go back on census, which we just did, and you can look for households that, list 6 or more people in the household, and you can send them a notification that they have priority. It could be done. I cannot imagine the system in which it would be done.
Rodney, you have a piece here in Informed American, a Valentine's Day present for New Yorkers. Governor Cuomo allows indoor dining on February 14th. And you start off here saying, that's interesting timing. Rodney, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's obvious, right? I mean, the guy who's hated indoor dining and you can't get together and we're going to fine you and all these other things. And all of a sudden he says, hey, guess what? The economy's kind of tanking and cases are coming down. So let's open it up on Valentine's Day, which tends to be the busiest day for restaurants in the year. And some of this is a little suspect in that cases aren't coming down that fast in New York City. And so it's like, well, this must be about economics. Well, if that's about economics, then why did you wait until February 14th, being after the election and everything? Why didn't you do it for New Year's, which is another great day for people going out? And so, yeah, some of this is going to happen no matter what, right? As the virus was kind of running through the economy and things were happening, by calendar, it was going to happen through the election. And so by calendar, the things that are positive, being reopening the economy and making steps to, allow things to work, are going to come after the election. But it sure does feel like it's got a little bit of a timing issue to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. And speaking of timing and Cuomo, I started seeing actual news reporting from the mainstream media about Cuomo undercounting nursing home deaths. That's interesting timing as well, isn't it?
Right, by up to 50%. I mean, it's a big deal, and it's once again it sows that mistrust of the official numbers you get. And how could it not, right? When you hear later, and when we say later, we're talking 6-7 months later, that the counts from last summer of deaths in nursing homes was underreported because they didn't count people who were transported from a nursing home to a hospital and then died, as if they lived in the hospital, right? And so you look at it and think, well, clearly this was misdirection by somebody in a position of authority. And so how could I not mistrust the numbers? This is the frustrating thing that runs through many lines of government.
Yeah, absolutely. Rodney, the news from your home state of Texas, Democrat Representative Sheila Jackson Lee wants to create a national gun registry, and included in that is charging $800 per year, the cost of owning a firearm. Rodney, is there, first of all, I want to hear your thoughts on having to shell out $800 a year to the government for being a part of the registry. And is there something else more than simply that $800 that the Democrats may have in mind for a national gun registry?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's Democrats. It's certainly Sheila Jackson Lee, who happens to be just up the road from me here. And her problem is that she's now asking for people to sign up for the government, watch list. It's like, well, wow, this is a double whammy. Not only are you saying I have to put myself on the list, but I have to pay for the privilege. It's a non-starter because you're now, as it will be framed, you are paying to exercise your Second Amendment rights. And so I don't think it's going anywhere, but it's certainly offensive on the face of it, right? It's like paying to have to express your opinion. It's like, that seems like a problem. So
is this the equivalent of a poll tax?
It actually is the equivalent of a poll tax. And so, and to that end, I mean, who would be able to register and own weapons? The people who could afford $800. I couldn't tell from the language of the bill if it's $800 per weapon or $800 per person to register. But still, $800 is not small, and that's annual. That's not once and done. And so that's. I found that to be a pretty interesting piece of legislation, particularly being that she's here in Texas.
Yeah, I'd love to know what everybody thinks about the idea of a national gun register. Gun registry. Please comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. Also, in there, last thing on that, tying in a psychological evaluation. I like this. I think we know where this might be going.
Yeah, you have to submit to a psychological evaluation and all sorts of other things for, I was about to say actually, for the privilege of owning a weapon.
Uh-huh.
When, as interpretation has shown through, the years, it's not a privilege, it's a right. And so again, this is going to be, I think it's, dead on the face of it. But still, the fact that an elected representative would go so far as to not express it, but truly write this legislation and present it, just shows a wanton disrespect for a basic right that we have. And I find that to be tragic.
Yeah, I'd be curious if in the psychological evaluation, if there's a question here, did you vote for Donald Trump? And if you say yes, you'll be declared mentally unfit.
Yeah, I don't think that's in there, but yeah, it's a problem.
Speaking of Trump, another story here from InformedAmerican.com. A world without Trump is hard on the network. CNN viewership plummets. As you have here, 44%. I actually have, it's not just CNN. I've got another graph here. I'm gonna pop up here. So CNN is down prime time 8, 9, and 10 p.m. All the way up to 50% down at the 10 p.m. slot. Now, the only one here between Fox, MSNBC, and CNN that has any positive growth is Fox News at 8 p.m., which I believe is Tucker Carlson's slot. But MSNBC also down 20%. CNN absolutely loved Donald Trump, didn't they? And now they can't gin up that hate anymore. What are they going to do, Rodney?
I don't know. They're going to have to find somebody new to hate on, right? Because if you recall, I mean, CNN was actually doing quite poorly before the 2016 election. They were not in a good place. And so Donald Trump was their savior. Same true for MSNBC. And so now that he's gone from, the national stage, I don't know what they're going to do. They should be writing hate letters to Jack Dorsey because the best thing they had with Trump out of office was Trump's tweets. And so the fact that he's not on a platform like that is a big problem. And so, yeah, they need to figure out somebody else that they can go hate on so that they can get some people back.
CNN, find yourselves a new target.
Yep.
Last thing here, Rodney. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a nice punching bag for conservatives. She said she was terrified during the Capitol breach, which is odd because she wasn't there. She had a series of tearful social media posts and basically saying how she was terrified. Of course, but she was actually just a couple of blocks away from the Capitol. She was not near the Capitol rioters. And even she said when she was in her office, a policeman barged in and gave her a mean look, Rodney. This must have been a very terrifying ordeal.
Right. So this is actually, I think, more important than, we give it credit for, because it's kind of funny. She did a 90-minute video, I believe, tearful video. And she talked about how she has been assaulted in the past. She mentioned she was sexually assaulted in her history and has not talked about that much. And then talked about this feeling of, incredible terror that, somebody might attack and kill her. And she actually said in a different tweet to Ted Cruz, you tried to have me murdered. But here's the thing that's much more important that we kind of gloss over. This is gaslighting. And this is one of the best examples of taking a set of facts and then twisting it to where it means something different than what actually happened. And it's overweighting something that is marginal and it's discounting something that's big. And so that's what gaslighting is, right? Is to say, oh, no, don't really pay attention to the facts. Pay attention to this thing over here. And so AOC is turning the attention to her feelings. And she's saying, I was terrified when the Capitol was breached because, I was in my office, blah, 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 blah. She doesn't mention that her office is in the Cannon building, which is, it's about a block and a half away. It's a little bit diagonal to the Capitol. It is not the Capitol. And so it is connected by a series of tunnels and whatever else. But she wasn't close. I mean, you look out a window, if her window faced that direction, which I don't know, you could see it. But it's not as if the people who were going in and sitting, at the speaker's chair and whatever were near her. They were not. And a Capitol policeman knocked on her door to let her know that they were evacuating the building, right? And there is another rep 2 doors down who said, look, there was nobody here. We're just in our offices kind of doing our job. But the fact that she turns the attention to herself and said, I was so terrified, she's trying to gain sympathy and empathy for her position that it doesn't warrant and make herself a victim. And that's the thing we've got to fight against. We've got to push back and go, no, you don't get to be a victim. There are real victims out there, and that's not you in this. So I look at this as a bit more sinister than just, you told a fib. It's you're trying to continue to pull this attention to yourself as a victim. And that's the thing that's hurting us as people do this all the time.
Yes, you use the victim status to then get what you want.
That's right.
Something unrelated.
And I will tell you that this story is not going away because several people came to her defense and said, oh, the right, wingers are now turning this into what it's not. She was terrified and she was in a building connected, blah, 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 blah. And in 2 years, we're going to hear about how she was so terrified when the insurrection happened because she was personally at risk, which isn't true. But it's going to be there in the mainstream media as we go forward.
And independent fact checker Snopes was quickly there to come to her defense.
That's my point.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, actually, I may just share this because it's just hilarious. The bending here. AOC exaggerated the danger she was. The claim is that AOC exaggerated the danger she was in during the during the January 6th Capitol riot, which she was, quote, wasn't even in the Capitol building when the rioting occurred. Our rating mostly false. And it says she wasn't in the Capitol building, but she was in her office.
Right. It lists the part that was true and said she wasn't there, but she felt terrified. She felt threatened. And it's like, well, come on. I mean, and so that's my point, is that this is going to stay in the mainstream media, and it's going to be, people are going to come back to it in years saying, well, remember when she was almost killed? That's going to be the thing.
Remember when Ted Cruz tried to have her killed?
That's the thing, right? And so that's, you got to fight gaslighting wherever you see it, because people will twist the facts.
Well, Rodney, who are you to discount someone's lived experience?
Well, and there's the thing, right? How do you tell somebody what they didn't feel? That's not my job. My job is to say, is it reasonable or not? And that's a pretty easy call here.
Excellent. Just a closing remark here. There appears to be a deal on stimulus in the Senate, at least. Well, not even a deal. The Democrats just passed it on their own. And it's going back to the House. So we will see what comes out of that. But there may be some negotiations in the House. So we're not gonna dive too deep into that. When something's more formalized, we'll break that down for you. I want to thank you all for watching. Rodney, thank you for coming on. I want you all to head on over to Informed American. If you're watching on our site, please sign up for our free newsletter. We want to know what you think about all of these topics. Please comment down below. If you're watching on Facebook, please hit the like button, share this video with your friends. If you're on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. And Rodney, when they head on over to informedamerican.com, check out our site, sign up for our free e-letter. What kind of stories can they expect in their inbox in the coming days?
Well, it's going to be the stimulus, as you mentioned, right? The Democrats had their first vote that was split down party lines, meaning in the Senate, and then using Kamala Harris as the tiebreaker, they did pass that bill yesterday or early this morning, I think. And so this is going to be budget reconciliation. And like you said, we won't go into it, but it's just going to be the big story next week, because if they pass it that way, then there is no unity. This is not compromise. We're going to do 100% of what we want, which is really funny because it's not what President Trump was doing before. He did this with his tax cut. There's no question. He used the same thing, yep. But the House held up the relief package last fall. So I don't know. That's what we're going to be watching.
Absolutely. For Rodney Johnson, I'm Dave Oakenquist telling you to get informed, America.
You've been listening to Get Informed, America, brought to you by the Informed American Radio Network. Please like and subscribe today in order to get new exclusive weekly episodes. Any questions, thoughts, or comments can be sent directly to info@informedamerican.com. And don't forget to visit informedamerican.com to keep up with real, smart news. Until next time, fight fake news and find common ground.